So tell me this, how did New Edition have the #1 record in the country, do a national tour, and still end up broke? You guys just saw the movie, you just saw the first episode of the new series on BET. It was amazing, it was dope. I encourage everybody to watch 2 and 3, but they did all that and they got a check for $1.87. How does that happen? Well, today on Phase 6, we're going to talk about that. As you guys know, this is Phase 6, your source for music, business, motivation, and support. It's your boy, Sirr Love, and today the topic is Recoupables. Let's do it. All right, so I felt like it was necessary to kind of talk about Recoupables, especially since, they kind of breezed through it on the show. One thing that I notice about, movies, about artists and music, I'm very particular and very critical, like when you understand the business and like the in and sides and how things kind of move. It's really interesting to watch how those transactions happen and how they're depicted more so, in television. Generally, they show the same type of scenario over and over again, especially since, early 80s, 90s, really 70s, really everything before the mid-2000s, everything was kind of done the same way. Now, I wasn't there during that time period. I was a kid, but just by watching what happened and just my understanding and knowledge of the group and some of the things that transpired in the past, you can kind of break down exactly what happened. So in general, how does this happen to someone like you, especially during that time period? I'll break it down for you. All right, so during that time period, whenever you signed a record deal, they gave you what is called an advance, all right? The purpose of an advance is it's an early check preview of what's to come. It's an advance on the profit that you're supposed to make in the future, okay? You're supposed to take this money and use this money to market your project, to record your album, to do all these different things. So basically, an advance is a loan, right? So the label says, hey, you need to record an album. You don't have the tools, the money to finance the album. So we're going to go ahead and pay for it, and you're going to pay us back whenever you get paid. That's the concept of what an advance is. Now, there are all these stories about people getting their advances, balling out, tricking off, buying houses, cars, this, that, and the third. But in the, in the case of New Edition and for a lot of other artists, according to what we just saw, depicted in this visual, they didn't even have the opportunity to do that, right? But the advance still existed because they did get the opportunity to go in the studio, record records, this, that, and the third, all right? Now, generally, an artist, in order for them to pop off in that time period, recording was very expensive. It's not as cheap as it is now. The equipment was expensive. The people that ran the boards and this, that, and the third, the whole process was expensive. So I don't know how much money their deal was, but you're talking about a good lump sum of money is going to be spent in just production costs. Not to mention, producers. There's always been celebrity producers and known producers and upcoming producers, but any producer of any status charges more money for their tracks or for their beats or for their mixing or for their mastering or for the studio that they record in than other individuals, right? And so all of that kind of increases your cost. So what type of cost are you looking at? Well, generally you're going to be looking at your recording costs, right? You're going to be looking at your promotional costs, right? Promotional costs are going to be television, radio, any type of, promotional expenses. Then you're going to have your marketing costs, right? This is the people that are taking your pictures, your video, all the other type of stuff that's being shot, put together, right? You're going to have your touring costs, the actual price of making the tour happen, of promoting the tour, of getting you on the road, take you from this location to that location, the stage, the dances, to this, to that, whatever. You have the price associated with distribution, the packaging, the shipping, this, that, and the third. Now, note that, distribution has its own little mechanisms in itself, but just for simplicity, we're just going to say all of these are part of your general expenses, right? All of this is money that the label is fronting on the strength that you're going to sell enough albums to give them their money back, okay? In addition to doing so, they're also going to make you pay back any additional things that they put in there, such as per diems. Per diems are very popular. What is that? When you watch the show, they had their own apartment. Well, who's paying for the apartment, right? How do these guys have the money to have an apartment? They got these new motorcycles, what do they call them? Baymaxes or I don't know. Whatever it was, it looked like a really dope bicycle with a motor on it, right? Who do you think paid for that? They actually ended up having to pay for that themselves. That's a gift. However, the gift is a part of your general expenses. If the label buys you a car, best believe that you bought the car. They just fronted the expenses for the car for you. All right? So all of these things add up over time. You have to pay it back. Now, what makes it so hard to pay back? Even you say, okay, it was a #1 record. They had to sell all these albums. They went on the road and did this, that, and the third. Well, the thing about it is normally when you signed a deal back then, you had like an 80-20 scenario, right? In which the label owned about 80% of everything and you own 20% of everything. Now that's if you got back then a good deal, right? It could be far worse than that. They could have more ownership of the situation. Because of that, every time you sell albums, you're not making, all that money off the album. If you're making 25 cents per album during that time period and you sell 1 million copies, you might not be, making enough money to afford all the expenses that it took to break you. In addition to all of this stuff that's going on, right? At the exact same time, you got to understand that the label moves a certain type of way. There's a certain chemistry, there's a certain type of flow when you're in a business process and you're making moves. One part of the intangibles that happens in the space is that you're trying to make sure that your people are taken care of. So if I'm in, whatever department and this huge budget comes down the pipeline while I'm in this department, I want to take care of the people that take care of me. There might be a photographer that's done some favors for me, a video person that's done some favors for me if I'm in marketing, right? Or if I'm in promotions, there's a person at this station or does whatever at this radio that I have a relationship with that I want to rock with more. Like whatever you deal with, whatever space you're in, there's some people that you rock with or lean with just a little bit more than others. And so a lot of times you see a lot of padding and fluffing of the numbers. What does that look like? Okay, well, you got $100,000 to do some marketing. The video, you can shoot the video for $10,000, but you do the video for $20,000. Why? Because the person is charging $20,000 is a person you have a relationship with, and you want to look out for them because you need them to do a favor for something else that ain't got nothing to do with the artist, but the artist is going to have to pay for that. That's the type of general fluff that just happens as a part of doing business. In addition, you have the people that like to make other little moves outside of it. Like, the video's $10,000, you charge $20,000 for the video. You tell the video person, look, man, I'm gonna shoot you $20,000. You shoot me $5 back. You made $5, I made $5. We both eat, walk away from it. Guess who has to pay that debt back? The artist. So that's the real skinny, the fluff and the padding of numbers and things that just kind of happen as normal workflow in a lot of situations. It's not just labels, there's a lot of different businesses in general in which that happens. A lot of companies try to stop or put it into that. But what other ways can that happen? Well, something that you guys might have not really paid attention to is that when they signed a deal, they didn't sign that deal directly with the label. They signed that deal with a producer that presented them with the deal from the label. So what does that tell me? That tells me that whatever they signed was not necessarily the full record label deal. It was probably a production deal or a shopping deal that was ran through the producer. So not only were if they did get an 80-20 split, now that 20 that they were getting is probably being split or taken almost entirely by another entity, which is the producer that now has his hand in the pot. And back then, the labels tried to own your masters, this, that, and the third. And the producer, since he was doing the beats, as you noticed, they walked in, the song was written, the beat was done already. You know what I'm saying? The guy already put the record together. He already got his hand in the publishing. That's the reason why he wouldn't shop the deal, because he had to make sure that they didn't give away the publishing, because that's his publishing they'd be trying to give away. Not saying that they could give it away because he's a producer, but in general, to protect his interest, it makes sense for him to shop that deal. Not saying that this is exactly how it went down. However, this is the business sense and strategy to how these things generally happen, right? Producer has to look out for himself, because a lot of times producers can make hit records. They got a hit and they're only as good as the last hit. Where's his long-term stability, this, that, and the third? He's looking out for his interest, whatever. All right, we're not talking about that aspect of it. But it's most likely they signed some type of shopping or production deal which took money out their pockets at one tier, then the label came in and they're taking money out their pockets in another tier. So how does this work and what does this really look like? Well, let me kind of explain it like this, make it real simple for you. Back then, getting a record deal was almost like leasing a car, right? You take out a loan to buy something that you don't own, and then you yourself still has to pay all the expenses for maintenance and upkeep of keeping that machine running, even though you don't own it. Only difference is, with a car, you can trade it in for another car. You only have to pay the difference. In a record label situation, after you've kind of signed that first situation and you don't own your masters, this, that, and the third, when it's time to do the next project, there is no discount, there is no trade-in. You don't get your second album, recording and this, that, and the third free. You're gonna end up taking out another loan to do the next album, or you're gonna have to come out your pocket to kind of make it happen, finesse it, figure it out. There's a lot of business strategies to use, but a lot of times you're in the hole on the first project, you try to do a second project, hoping that it does better than the first project so that you can get out the hole on the second and pay back the first. And that was kind of how people end up enslaved to record labels back then, because they ended up owing so much. Another concept of this you have to realize is that in this whole spectrum, this whole scheme of things, The artist doesn't have any control over what's being spent. They don't control how much money is being spent for marketing, how much is being spent for promotions, what's being spent where. Only thing that's happening is money is being spent by whoever's handling the budget to make sure that they're successful, hopefully, if they're great at their job and they know how to do what they're doing, they make them successful. But however, the artist has no control. No control. Now, there are deals that have caps and limits and things of that nature, and depending on how your attorney is set up, all this could be, set up differently. But in general, this was the conundrum that artists kind of found themselves in back in this time period, and that is how New Edition ends up broke, after their first project. So if you're out there right now and you're saying, man, I want to get my records out there, should I still be trying to sign a record deal? I did a video on that, did a whole video on that, talking about should I sign. I think the video is called Should I Sign? It's on the channel. You should check it out. I go more in depth with you. But if a deal was presented like the one that New Edition had to sign, I would say, hell no. However, there's a lot of opportunities out there for you to sign with majors or independents that move like majors or all sorts of people. Watch the video Major versus Independent, learn how this whole thing works. But I just broke down to you guys in simple layman terms how you can have a #1 record and go broke, or be broke and never get paid. And least they ended up with $1.87 to split. It could have been worse. They could have ended up in the hole, right? It's your boy Sirr Love. I don't know everything, but I know a lot about a little and a little about a lot. And I get on this thing all the time just to give you guys everything that I got. Thank you for watching Phase 6.
Real talk, no chase. Real talk, no chase. Real talk, no chase. Real talk, I said real talk. I said real talk, no chase. Real talk, no chase. Real talk, no chase.